What is the worst defeat in military history? Is it the annihilation of an entire Roman legion? How about 3 entire legions? Welcome to the channel. Today we re-exploring the worst defeat in Roman history and one of the worst defeats in human history, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. The year is 09 CE, and the mighty Roman Empire has been growing for the last 70 years. But now its most famous emperor Augustus wants to make his rule official across Germania, the wildlands north of the Rhine River. And so he sends in his best general, Publius Quinctilius Varus, to enforce Roman law and collect taxes from these wild tribes. But here's the problem. Those tribes are not too happy with this new taxman. Especially the Germanic tribes around the Teutoburg Forest hate Varus and Rome. They hate how their land has been claimed. They hate how their women have been taken, and they hate how their people have been forced to become subjects of the Roman Empire. And their hatred is led by the most dangerous man in the region, Prince Arminius of the Carusi tribe. Now Arminius isn't your typical barbarian chieftain. You see? He spent a lot of time with the Romans. He fought in the Roman army and even learned Latin. And so when Rome came to Germania, he saw the writing on the wall. He knew that he couldn't defeat them in open battle. So instead, he did something different. While working for the Roman governor, he secretly united all of the local tribes against Rome. He promised them freedom from the hated Romans and united them under his banner. And then he waited for his chance to strike. And in September of 09 CE, he finally got it. As we mentioned, Varus wanted to bring the tribes of northern Germania into the Roman fold. And so he started to move 3 of his legions into the region to show the tribes who was really in charge. The thing was, though the tribes weren't planning to resist him outside in the open field, instead, Arminius lured him deeper into the Teutoburg Forest. See, in modern Germany, the Teutoburg Forest isn't all that impressive. It's mostly just a pretty normal wooded area. But in ancient times, it was one of the densest, darkest forests in Europe. It was filled with swamps, bogs, and thick undergrowth. Even during the day, it was hard to see and nearly impossible to maneuver. And so, when Varus and his men entered the woods, they were already in trouble. Of course, Varus didn't know that. In fact, he was kind of cocky. He was a seasoned veteran who had fought all over the empire, from Gaul to Egypt, and now he was taking on some backwoods tribesmen. Plus, he had 3 whole legions with him, roughly 20,000 well-trained Roman soldiers, and so he felt pretty confident. In fact, he likely assumed that his men would be in and out of the forest in a few days, having crushed any rebellion before it even started. He only had one real problem. These Germanic tribes were experts at fighting in the woods. In fact, it was their home turf. Meanwhile, Roman soldiers were used to fighting in the open fields, in neat lines where they could see their enemies coming. But in this dark, dank forest, they were at a huge disadvantage. And things got even worse when they arrived at their first camp. See, while Varus's army was strong, it was also spread thin. Each of his 3 legions covered too much ground, and there was no way for him to protect them all. So instead, He had to station his troops every 10 miles along a single road. Meanwhile, Prince Arminius was waiting nearby with his rebel forces. And when Varus set up his camp, he sent his best warriors to attack. The first assault caught the Romans completely off guard. Suddenly, Germanic warriors were swarming the camps, firing arrows and throwing spears. From the safety of the trees, the Germans were deadly, but they never stayed around long enough for the Romans to fight back. In fact, the Germans never engaged the Romans in open battle. Instead, they attacked supply depots, baggage trains, and detached units. They used hit-and-run tactics, peering out of nowhere and disappearing back into the woods before the Romans could respond. And so the Romans were stuck, pinned inside their camps with no way out. You might think that Varus could have just marched his men out of the forest and crushed the rebels, but he didn't. And again, this was because of the nature of the terrain. The narrow roads and thick undergrowth made it nearly impossible for the legions to maneuver. Plus, the deep mud made marching incredibly difficult. Even if they tried to flee, they would have been stuck in the mud. Not to mention, while the Romans were stuck in the forest, Arminius had more tricks up his sleeve. While his warriors harassed the Roman camps, he sent other warriors to find and attack the Roman allies. You see, when the Romans came to Germania, they didn't just bring soldiers. They also brought cavalry and auxiliary troops from their allied states like Pannonia, Rhaetia, and Syria. But Arminius sent his warriors to attack them in the forest, cutting off reinforcements and supplies to the Romans. Arminius was basically a master of guerrilla warfare. His warriors knew the forest like the back of their hands. They used the thick undergrowth to hide their movements. They ambushed supply columns and isolated detachments. For 3 straight days, the Germans kept up their hit-and-run attacks. And the longer it went on, the worse it got for the Romans. Their supplies were dwindling, and their morale was dropping. Varus was desperate. He knew he needed to get his men out of the forest, but he didn't know how. And then he got a lucky break. A local chieftain contacted him and offered to lead his men out of the forest. But unfortunately, it was too little, too late. By this point, the 3 legions were spread thin across the forest. And so Varus gathered what men he could and marched them towards the coast. And this is where it all went wrong. See, while Varus and his men were finally leaving the forest, they ran into another group of Germanic warriors. But unfortunately, they weren't about to make it out alive. This final battle would go down as the worst defeat in Roman history. Those 3 Roman legions were completely wiped out. Legio, 17, 18, and 19 were decimated by the Germanic tribes. Most of the soldiers were killed in battle, but some were captured and enslaved. Others managed to escape, but they would later be hunted down and sacrificed to the gods by the victorious tribes. As for Varus himself, he refused to surrender. When he realized that his men were defeated, he took his own life to avoid capture. News of the disaster reached Rome in the spring of 08 CE. It absolutely shocked the empire. Emperor Augustus was furious, and he reportedly shouted, "Quinctilius Varus," which translates to, "Varus, give me back my legions." Key was clear to everyone in Rome that the Germanic tribes were far stronger than anyone expected. And so Augustus decided to abandon his plans to conquer Germania east of the Rhine. In fact, the Rhine would become the permanent boundary of the Roman Empire in the north. As for Arminius, he was seen as a hero by the Germanic tribes, and he would later be called Hermann the Liberator. He'd gone from a Roman client to a Roman enemy to a full-blown folk hero. Sadly, he died in 21 CE after falling off his horse. But his victory in the Teutoburg Forest changed European history forever. The Romans would never permanently conquer Central or Northern Europe, and that victory helped lay the foundation for modern Germany. And yet, despite how important the battle was, we actually know very little about it. We don't even know exactly where it took place. All we have are a few archaeological sites like Kalkriese, Germany, which have revealed some clues. For example, archaeologists found a Roman brooch with the name of a unit from the 17th Legion, which indicates that this site may have been the location of the battle, but overall, the mystery remains. In many ways, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest is still unexplained. But one thing is for sure, it was one of the worst defeats in military history, and one of the greatest victories for the Germanic tribes. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe and leave a like. And as always, thanks for watching.